Laredo, Texas, 1973. A border city where the air smells of diesel and dust, where trucks rumble toward the Rio Grande, where English and Spanish collide on every street corner. This is where Edgar Valdez Villarreal takes his first breath. He isn't born into poverty, not like the narcos across the river. His family, middle class, respectable. His childhood, safe by border standards. High school football star, Friday night lights, crowds cheering his name. He had the grin, the charm, the golden boy glow. Teachers thought he'd make something of himself, something legal, something American. But inside Edgar, something restless, something hungry. The American dream, 9-to-5 jobs, mortgages, retirement. It tasted bland. He wanted more, money, power, respect. The kind of respect you can't buy in a hardware store. The kind that makes men lower their eyes when you walk past. And across the Rio Grande, he saw men who had all three. Cartel men, kings in cowboy boots, their trucks shiny, their belts stitched with gold, their pockets heavy with dollars stained by Colombian coca. Edgar didn't want to admire them. He wanted to join them. The border was a stage, and Valdez learned the script early. Friends in high school whispered about smuggling. A little weed here, a little blow there. It wasn't glamorous at first. Just side cash, just fun. But the numbers grew. The stakes grew. By the time most of his classmates were filling out college applications, Edgar was filling trunks with product. And he had the look. Clean cut. American. The kind of guy Border Patrol waved through without a second glance. It was his greatest weapon, his innocence. They called him La Barbie because of that face. Light skin, blue eyes, a smile that could sell anything. The nickname stuck like blood on concrete. Laredo taught him two things. 1. The border is a vein pumping money and death in both directions. 2. The man who controls that vein controls everything. Valdez wanted control. Not to be a runner, not to be a messenger. He wanted to be the man giving orders, the name whispered in fear. By his early 20s, he was no longer the kid from the football field. He was something else, something harder. A man who saw the border not as a line, but as an opportunity. Opportunity for what? For everything. For a life measured not in years, but in bodies. And this was just the beginning. Because Edgar Valdez Villarreal wasn't crossing the border to escape poverty. He was crossing it to become a king. He was the American dream gone south, straight into hell. While others smuggled drugs, Edgar Valdez Villarreal offered something different. Something primal. Something cartels couldn't buy in bulk. Violence. Pure, industrialized violence. Smugglers chased profit. Valdez chased fear. Because fear is the strongest currency in the underworld. Fear makes rivals disappear. Fear makes men obey without asking why. He built his crew from the ground up, not street punks. Not junkies with guns. Killers. Professionals. Men who could move like shadows and strike like thunder. They weren't Mexican. They weren't American. They were both. Born on the border. Raised on 2 flags, 2 languages, 2 sets of rules, and none at all. And they learned Valdez's code. Precision over chaos. Speed over mercy. No bodies left alive to talk. They carried military rifles, night vision goggles, encrypted radios, vehicles armored like tanks, and in their bags, tools of terror, chainsaws, acid, duct tape. They didn't just kill, they erased. This wasn't a gang. This was a paramilitary unit with an American face. Word spread fast through Mexico's underworld. Who is this gringo who laughs while pulling triggers? Cartel bosses paid attention. One in particular, Arturo Beltrán Leyva, the king of cruelty. Arturo didn't want loyalty, he wanted results. And La Barbie delivered results like bullets from a belt-fed machine gun. Hits in Nuevo Laredo, ambushes on Sinaloa convoys, bodies dumped on highways like trash bags split open to rot in the sun. Valdez wasn't just muscle anymore. He became Arturo's enforcer, his hammer of death. When someone crossed Beltrán Leyva, Valdez didn't send warnings. He sent heads in coolers. They called him La Barbie because of that face. The light skin, the blue eyes, the perfect teeth. He smiled in every crime scene photo, like it was a joke only he understood. But that smile? It wasn't friendly. It was cold. The grin of a man who learned that violence is the fastest elevator to power. Arturo Beltrán Leyva gave him authority, soldiers, and a license to kill. And Valdez embraced it like a second skin. Every execution, every kidnapping, it wasn't chaos. It was business. Because in Mexico, business isn't always measured in pesos. Sometimes, it's measured in blood. He wasn't a hitman with charm. He was charm with a hit list. Valdez didn't just kill. He orchestrated fear. Each move was a production, calculated, choreographed. When someone vanished under Barbie's watch, the silence spoke louder than screams. Days later, their fate would appear like a headline written in shadows. For Edgar, death wasn't random. It was language. Every act had an audience. Every stage had a purpose. A bridge at dawn. A lonely highway under the orange Mexican sun. Locations chosen for maximum effect. Places that turned into monuments of dread overnight. The message was always the same. This is what happens when you cross us. But Edgar gave it a signature twist. Style over chaos, symbolism over frenzy. Where rivals spread fear like a shotgun blast, he fired with the precision of a sniper. It wasn't just violence. It was theater. And Edgar? He was the director. Unlike the old-school capos who avoided cameras like the plague, Valdez embraced them, smiling during arrests, cracking jokes at press conferences, the American assassin who wore arrogance like a tailored suit. He turned brutality into a spectacle, not behind closed doors, but on front pages. The world expected shadows. Barbie gave them a spotlight. Journalists ate it up. Headlines painted him as the American Sicario, the football kid turned cartel star, a man who blurred the border between folklore and nightmare. He wasn't just another trigger man. He was a performance artist in a war without rules. But there was more than vanity at play. His theatrics served strategy. Every public display amplified his employer's reach. The Beltrán Leyva cartel. Rivals didn't just fear the bullet, they feared humiliation, the transformation of their defeat into a cautionary tale broadcast across Mexico. Power, Edgar understood, isn't only about force. It's about narrative. Fear that lingers in the mind long after the blood is washed away. And so he curated his legend carefully. Social charm for the cameras, steel for the streets. He was fluent in 2 languages, English and Spanish, but also in 2 codes, celebrity and savagery. In the end, it worked. His name became a brand, a whispered warning in border towns, a headline in glossy magazines, Barbie, a nickname that mocked his clean-cut looks even as it became synonymous with death. For Edgar Valdez Villarreal, killing wasn't an act of rage, it was marketing. And fear was the product. He didn't just take lives, he sold terror like it was luxury. By 2008, Mexico burned. The war on drugs wasn't just headlines anymore. It was a symphony of gunfire echoing from Tijuana to Tamaulipas. Cartels fractured, alliances shattered like glass on concrete. And in the chaos, Edgar Valdez Villarreal thrived. Barbie wasn't built for peace. He was a shark, and the ocean had never been redder. His world was perpetual motion. One week, he was orchestrating ambushes against the Gulf cartel. The next, he was trading bullets with Los Zetas, men as ruthless as himself, ex-special forces who turned their uniforms into death warrants. Every skirmish raised the stakes. Every betrayal carved the rules deeper into stone. Trust no one. Strike first. Survive at any cost. But Edgar wasn't just fighting outsiders. Sometimes the blood spilled was from his own house. The Beltrán Leyva cartel, once his sanctuary, was splitting down the middle. Brothers who once moved like a single organism began to eye each other with suspicion. Greed infected everything. And Barbie? He saw opportunity in the cracks. For him, loyalty wasn't a virtue, it was a tactic. Temporary, disposable, a chip to trade when the board shifted. And in Mexico, the board shifted every day. War became his profession and his addiction. Convoys of SUVs barreled down highways like armored beasts. Grenades shattered quiet streets. Kidnappings became currency, and executions, marketing. Edgar played all sides because playing one meant death. To his enemies, he was a phantom. Hard to corner, harder to kill. To his allies, he was a storm. Useful, destructive, impossible to control. And through it all, his ambition grew. Valdez didn't dream small. He didn't want a seat at the table. He wanted the table, the crown, the empire, the legend. But power in Mexico's underworld is a mirage. Always close, never in hand. For every move Barbie made, there was another predator watching. Government forces tightened the noose. Rivals sharpened their knives. Friends rehearsed betrayal behind his back. Still, Edgar smiled. That perfect, camera-ready grin. The same grin that would make headlines when the federales finally dragged him out of the shadows. Because in his mind, the war wasn't chaos. It was design. His design. In a country drowning in blood, he wasn't just another killer. He was the man who learned to swim. August 30th, 2010. The cameras flash like gunfire. Reporters swarm. Microphones raised like weapons. And in the center of the chaos stands Edgar Valdez Villarreal, Barbie. But this isn't a man dragged down in defeat. This is a man posing for his close-up. Clean-shaven, polo shirt pressed, hair neat like he's on his way to a country club, not a maximum security cell. And that smile, wide, cocky, almost playful. The kind of grin that spits in the face of justice. He isn't broken. He isn't even nervous. He's enjoying the moment. How did it come to this? The truth is, Edgar's empire was crumbling long before the cuffs clicked shut. The Beltrán Leyva cartel had imploded after Arturo Beltrán Leyva, Barbie's mentor, his king, was gunned down in a hail of bullets by Mexican Marines in 2009. With Arturo gone, the house of cards collapsed. Factions turned on each other like rabid dogs. Former allies became rivals. Every phone call could be a death sentence. Every meeting, a trap. Valdez played the game as long as he could. He built his own faction, recruited killers, bribed officials, tried to carve out a throne in the chaos. But the circle was closing. Government forces wanted a trophy. Rivals wanted his head. And Edgar? He was running out of time. On the morning of his arrest, it wasn't a spectacular shootout. No cinematic last stand. It ended on a quiet stretch of road near Mexico City. Federal police swarmed. He surrendered without a bullet fired. Then came the spectacle. Barbie, once the smiling ghost of Mexico's blood wars, paraded in front of cameras like a trophy buck. But instead of shame, he delivered a performance. That grin didn't fade. If anything, it grew sharper. Reporters shouted questions, and then he spoke. His voice calm, almost amused. ¿Qué cartel? Trabajé para todos. Which cartel? I worked for all of them. It was the perfect line. A confession and a punchline rolled into one. The ultimate truth of the drug war. In a land where loyalties shift like desert sands, Edgar wasn't tied to a flag. He was the storm that hit everyone. The photographs from that day became legend. The clean-cut assassin, the Texas kid turned cartel icon, the smiling wolf in chains. For the government, it was a victory. For the media, a spectacle. For the cartels, a warning. If Barbie could fall, anyone could. But for Edgar Valdez Villarreal, it was something else. A stage. One last performance before the curtain dropped. They caught the man, but the smile, that still walks free. Today, Edgar Valdez Villarreal sits in a concrete box thousands of miles from the blood-soaked streets that made his name. No gunmen, no convoys, no bodies swinging from bridges. Just silence. But silence doesn't kill a legend. It feeds it. Barbie is more famous now than when he roamed free. His story became a myth stitched together with corridos, headlines, and whispered conversations in prison yards. The American kid who crossed the line and became a monster south of the border. He wasn't just a hitman. He was an idea. A fusion of two worlds. Texas football hero meets Mexican cartel royalty. That made him dangerous and marketable. The old-school bosses wanted shadows, invisibility, silence. Valdez wanted the opposite. Cameras, headlines, fame. He smiled for every lens, posed like a celebrity. He understood something most narcos didn't. In the modern drug war, violence wasn't just power. It was theater. And every execution was a show. His killings were staged with precision, like macabre advertisements, bodies lined up on highways, heads tossed into nightclubs, victims dangling from overpasses, messages carved into their flesh. Every murder screamed the same line: "Cross us, and this is your future." That formula didn't die with his arrest. It metastasized. Today, cartels compete in brutality like influencers competing for likes. Videos of torture circulate like music videos. Executions go viral. Barbie wrote that script. He turned terror into content long before social media amplified the blood. His capture in 2010 didn't close the book. It opened a new chapter. First, Mexico paraded him in front of cameras. Then the US locked him away for life. But even behind bars, Edgar moves like a shadow. His name surfaces in rumors. Did he cut deals with the DEA? Did he betray allies? Did he survive a prison hit? Truth is irrelevant. Legends don't need facts. They need a good story. And Barbie's story is perfect. A suburban kid from Laredo who swapped a football helmet for a rifle, who smiled while Mexico bled, who proved that the border isn't a line, it's an open wound. Cartel violence today still echoes his signature. Every headline about dismembered bodies, every chilling video, every narco banner hung on a freeway, those are ripples of a wave Barbie helped create. Because Edgar Valdez Villarreal wasn't just killing people. He was industrializing terror. He branded it, marketed it, exported it across Mexico like cocaine in a trunk. Now, under the fluorescent glow of a US federal prison, the man who loved the spotlight is drowning in darkness. No cameras, no audience, just four walls and the weight of his legend. But make no mistake, Mexico still pays for his smile. He came from Friday Night Lights and ended under prison lights. Barbie, the killer who smiled.